Hey, well, what a day. If you're anything like me, your head will be swimming with information and perspectives you've heard on the podiums and in the discussions. I'm very conscious that we're both close to drinks, maybe even something a little stiffer than jasmine tea, Fran, and that also, Fran's got me on very strict instructions not to give a sermon from the mount. Let me just give you three takeaways in relation to today from me. From earlier in the morning, I think whether it was the Prime Minister or Ambassador Wang, we heard very clearly that the relationship between China and New Zealand is growing ever more complex, but actually is in good shape. And that may be a basic proposition, but I think nevertheless it's an important one to be clear on. And that point, the good shape that the relationship is in, was fleshed out not only at the macro but at the micro level from businesses throughout the day who gave example after example in practical terms of what that looks like for the business, as I say, community. The second point I'd make is that we may be today at whatever it is, 40 odd billion in two-way trade, but there's still room for growth. And again, you say, well, yeah, we get that, but actually that hasn't necessarily been a universally held position by some. And so it's an important point to make. I think we heard from Raymond Yong in a delightful presentation, and those graphics he'd been working on, or those graphs, I should say, so hard. Did you know the middle class of China is still growing, 400 to 800 million expected middle class, $1 trillion in growth year on year in financial terms, and opportunities from changing consumer tastes, technologies, demographics, whether that's young, old, singles, pets, even, and other trends beside. The challenge, I think, is to keep up with the pace of change, that China pace we kept hearing about, rather than, I suppose, the traditional Kiwi pace. The third point I'd make is that, and there are many points we could make, and I'm sure Fran will have different ones, but it's really around sustainability. And we've heard a lot about this over the years, been a lot of talk about it, and action, to be fair as well. But I feel like today that came through even more clearly as a theme. It's always been, as I say, part of the story, but now it's the real deal. Our clean, green image needs backup. It needs to be demonstrated practically because the Chinese consumer expects it, and also because it's part of our comparative advantage. I suppose I'd add, actually, it's the right thing to do. Actually, fourth point I've got here, Fran, don't worry, it's really brief. I can't see Fonterra's dirty cheese coffee catching on here. That would be just a point I would make. Finally, can I just thank my team who've done such, Katie and Natalie, Amelia and others who've done such a great job. And thank you, Fran, as the driving force of the China Business Summit, for all of your efforts. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon. I don't have a great deal to add to that, but what I felt about today is how comfortable we are now, perhaps discussing, which in some ways would have been seen as unpalatable truths, even going 5 or 6 years ago, in the tone of the Prime Minister and the Ambassador being able to speak and actually converse in quite a sophisticated way, and just lay out positions which once would have been, pretty much unaccepted in this forum without a little bit of blowback, shall we say. So I found that was great. I felt the other thing was people are comfortable among the Chinese and New Zealand business communities. I feel that we have become very integrated over the last decade or so in the period in which this summit has been going. And I just want to acknowledge here a couple of people, Lisa Lee and also Pania, Tyson, Nathan, who I think might have gone back to Wellington, each of whom have been what I would say is really good integrators in the relationship. And you see it not just at this summit, but you see it on the road, you see it at preparations for the import events in China later in the year. And I think that people-to-people connection has become stronger over the year. And I thank you, Lisa, and also Pania for the support you give this summit, because you know the roles you play. I also want to acknowledge Tim McCready, has done an excellent job as MC today, and all of you for the part you've played, speakers, attendees, and sponsors. Now, I'm going to get out of the way now so we can hand over to Tim to close out and go to the prize draw, but otherwise I'll see you later. Thank you.